Hello and welcome everybody to today's presentation. My name is Robert Cruitt. I am the Vice President of the West Texas Genealogical Society that's located in Abilene, Texas. I will be speaking about United States deeds. So let's dive in and learn. Beyond the Census, Unlocking Family Secrets in Deed Books. Our outline of discussion will cover the terminology, understanding a state's survey system, location, 5 common types, what's in a deed, research process, sharecropping and tenant farming, enslavement research, community research, and at the end I will give some tips and takeaways. So the question is, what is a deed? Well, a deed is just a formal document transferring property from one party to another. Pretty forward there. Well, let's get back to the basics for just a few minutes. Now, we have grantor and we have a grantee. The grantor is the seller. The grantee is your buyer. Important folks to remember, and sometimes you have more than one grantor listed as well as more than one of the grantee folks. Also, the deed record could include the words testate or intestate. Testate means that a person died and they had a will, but if they die without a will, then it is intestate. So what happens is with the testate, the property is distributed per instructions of the will, so ever how the person wanted it divided. And then intestate, the property is distributed by the state law. So whatever state they would be living in, they would follow the laws of the land. So it's important to know not just if there is a deed for your ancestor, if they did have a will, study the laws of the land. That's extra studying, but it's extremely beneficial. Understanding a state's surveying system. Now, we have state land states, and these included the original 13 colonies, which became the first 13 states after the American Revolution. Also included are Hawaii, Kentucky, Maine, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, and West Virginia. Some of these states were followed the 13 colonies, such as Kentucky, Maine, Vermont, Virginia, West Virginia. So those were the first main states, and then Texas, as we'll learn later, follows, and Hawaii as a state land state. Land is defined by metes and bounds. A mete, or metes, is linear measurements. These would include measurements in chains, rods, or feet, also poles, along boundary lines. Your bounds are your general descriptions of markers like roads, walls, or rivers. We have public land states or federal land states. These are states formed from federal territory, so this is the other 30 states in the Union. And the property is described by range, section, and township. Here's an example of what you might see in a metes and bounds state land state deed. Beginning at the southeast corner of the survey, running thence north 100 poles to a estate in a pond with birch and oak, thence north 11 poles to a large willow, to the northeast corner of John Smith's property, etc. So we'll look at an example of one of my ancestors who lived in a state land state, and we'll get to see what type of trees are listed, as well as if there is a neighbor. Here is a map that is from Family Search. This shows us the federal state lands versus the state land states. Everything in brown, state land state, including Texas, that's got the stripes, and Hawaii is in color brown. The remainder in the grayish color, bluish gray, whatever, are your federal land states. Please note The state of Texas is considered a state land state because it retained control over its public lands upon entering the United States, unlike most other states. When annexed in 1845, Texas kept its public domain, allowing it to manage its own land rather than ceding it to the federal government. So Texans said, we've had it set in stone for this amount of time. We're joining the Union, but we're going to keep it this way. So we did, and still to this day it continues. Go Texas. A meridian is an imaginary vertical line of longitude on a map or globe that connects the north and south poles. So imaginary. So again, it's just like a state boundary, county boundary, city boundary, country boundary, etc. Some of those are formed by natural things like rivers, for example, like the Mississippi River or the Rio Grande River that divides Texas and Mexico, for example. Okay, so meridians measure how far east or west a location is from the prime meridian. That passes through Greenwich, England. Hello to all my English friends who might be watching this. They are essential for navigation and dividing the Earth into eastern and western hemispheres. So this is only in the federal land states. Those 30 states that's in color there, notice that the state land states that are in white do not have the meridian because, again, meets and bounds is how the layout of the survey is done in those states. Township range and section. Townships are 6 mile squares measured north or south from a base line and labeled Township 1 North or Township 1 South. Ranges are 6 mile squares measured east or west from a principal meridian and labeled as Range 1 East or Range 1 West. Each township has 36 sections in a snake-like pattern, and it starts at the top right-hand corner, labeling it as section number 1. And I will be showing you a record of another ancestor that lived in state land, one of the states in the Union, and we will be able to see what section that he lived in and his family. Federal Public Land Offices. Okay, so these land offices are a government office and they record dealings in public land, so the 30 states. Please note, not only knowing the location of where your ancestor lived, but also knowing which land office that they would deal with when they made their purchase is very important. Because let's say the land office was about 100 miles from their physical home, or maybe it was only 5 miles, for example. You'll need to know and look at certain maps to be able to determine what land office that would be. A good reference for this is a book and that I have listed in one of the slides later by a gentleman, and it has the layout of the states by this, I think it's by the census year if I remember correctly, and it shows what counties were created at that time and what the land office was. And land offices change, they move locations, so that's something else to remember. Here is the Bureau of Land Management website. It's a fantastic site to use when you're doing your research. This is only for public land states, the 30 states, remember. So if you want to look for land records for the state of Texas, this is not the site to look. This is on your syllabus. And I recommend you going to look at it and just doing a search for an ancestor that lived in one of these 30 states. So it's very cool. We'll look at an example in a little bit. This is that example. It is my 3 times great-grandfather. His name was Gilbert Madicott Cruitt. Yes, he was English, and he immigrated to the States, and he eventually moved from the New England area down to South Alabama, where he lived out his life. And he purchased this property in 1845. At the time, the property was in Baldwin County. However, after the Civil War ended, the state designed a new county. They called it Escambia County, and his land and house and everything stayed the same. It's just that they redrew the lines, those imaginary lines, y'all. And he went from paying his taxes and living in Baldwin County to paying taxes in Escambia County and living in Escambia County out to the end of his days. And my this was again third great grandfather, my all the way down to my grandfather were born in Escambia County. And anyway, it's a beautiful area. I love it. We had a couple of family reunions there, and sure do miss them. Miss all that good, loving family. Okay, so if you'll notice the on the list there that if I can get my cursor up here, see you see Sparta, the office here, and then over here on the land patent we've got Land Office Sparta. Then um, then that is the land office where I would go to locate this information if I were living back at that time and I wanted to go and purchase land, for example. The land offices do change. He bought it, as I said, in 1845, and he was living in Section 1. Let me get my cursor going here. There we go. Here's Section 1 at the St. Stephen's Meridian. Now, the St. Stephen's Meridian ran in the southern part almost to a little above half of the state, and then you have the Huntsville Meridian from about, little over less than half of the state going up north. But of course, it stops because at the top of the state because it borders what state? Tennessee, and Tennessee is a state land state. So that imaginary meridian line stops. But where my ancestor lived, again, was in close to the St. Stephen's Meridian line area. And again, the gentleman's book is listed in the handout on the syllabus, and also on one of the slides we'll look at a little bit later. Now, this is really cool, or at least I think it is. I love maps. Okay, so you see, here's my cursor. So see the little square there, that is Section 1, as we saw in the other form, a document a minute ago. And even on this one at the top there, you see Section 1. So this tells me out of all those 36, his property was in that first square. And looking at it today, it is still in Escambia County. And this is a modern day map of Alabama. You have Escambia County, and then you've got Baldwin County, the imaginary line that divides them. And then, of course, you have the natural rivers here, landmarks, I should say, I guess, Little River, Turkey Creek, so on. And it's funny because now there is the Claude D. Kelly State Park. I'm actually related to some of the Kelly family there as well in Alabama. But anyway, this was on that website, the Bureau of Land Management. So when you go to find the deed, you can see that. And I'm going to go back just a minute. You can see the land patent details. So these two documents will be viewable, and then it lets you actually see the map. All of this is free on their site, and I'm going to go back again. If you want to have a copy of the deed, you can download it for free and print it. They also allow you to order if you want it to go through ordering, but anyway, that would just be your preference. So this is, again, for states that are public land states, the 30 states. So don't look for any Texas land records or Virginia or North or South Carolina, for example. And not Hawaii either. Sorry, y'all. All right, moving on. This is the Texas General Land Office's website, and this is also on your handout. So you can visit this website and you can research for land deeds for the state of Texas, just specifically for Texas, y'all. So check it out and see if some of your relatives might have some land records on here as well. Just browse it and enjoy it. Deed types and related records. These are a whole set of them. I'm going to put them up on the screen for us. Again, out of these, I'm only going to cover 5 main ones. But all of these, we have warranty deed, gift deed, partition, quitclaim, deed of trust, bills of sale, mortgages, marriage contracts, power of attorneys, lien releases, leases, and so on. And all of these are located in courthouses as well as in archives. And some of these have been put on Family Search. They were microfilmed. Many years back, when Family Search sent out the people to the states and the counties and the different countries to begin um, putting these records on microfilm, microfiche, they decided, hey, we're going to select only these sets of records that we consider to be genealogical. And some of the states, counties, I should say, we know may have had some record loss, whether it was due to a fire, flooding, the Civil War, any sort of a natural disaster, etc. Um, and so they considered those to be at risk, and they went in and they digitized everything. So check out Family Search and see if they have any of the locations that you're looking for. And if they do, then for that you can download those for free and print them. There's no charge. But also remember that all of these records that I have listed here, these types, are not all online. Whether it's Family Search or Ancestry.com, for example, you need to go in person to these locations and be able to do some digging. And anyway, this is the list here of all those. So we're going to talk about the 5 common types now. The first one is warranty deed. This certifies that the seller holds a clear and valid title. It commits the seller to protect the buyer from any title disputes. The second is deed of trust. They are used to guarantee repayment of a loan. A trustee holds the title as a neutral party. It allows for the sale of the property if the payments are missed, and these are used in sharecropping. The third type is gift deed. It's kind of self-explanatory. For example, if you had an ancestor that had a child that were getting, our ancestors that were getting married, perhaps they wanted to gift them some property as a wedding gift. And this was done quite frequently to keep the families close by and where they would be able to stay in touch and help out, especially during the harvest seasons. And it was just, it's also a way that this was used by parents to distribute the property among all of their descendants. So it might have been they wanted to give their grandchildren something, or perhaps great grandchildren. And then it was up to them, once it had been gifted, to do with as they pleased. And you'll see some of these, and these would just, they'll be listed in the deed as this was, I lovingly leave this land to my daughters who will be wed next month. They have, they were both engaged, and we want to give them some land, and so on. So you won't see a value in it because why? It's a gift to the family. Or maybe it was to a good friend or neighbor. The fourth type is quitclaim deeds. These signifies that the seller has given up any and all interest of the land. They've decided, I don't want this anymore. My grandpappy gave me all this land, and well, I want to go and live in the big city, go to Nashville, Tennessee and be a music star, or maybe Hollywood and be on the picture shows or so, in the picture shows or whatever. But, just kidding. But something like that. Sometimes these will also appear with someone doesn't have a will, intestate. Check that out. That would be very neat to see. So if you see, again, intestate, it means no will. I also want to point out here real quick that these will be labeled like QD, so quit claim deed, or GD for gift deed, for example. warranty deed, WD, and so on. So there is a column on in the index section that will have this. So when you see these initialed types, it says type of deed and it just initial, just know that that's what they stand for. And also use the, reference that slide back that I show with all those others, because again, there's several of them. Also, this is highly effective for identifying immediate family members with their spouses of female heirs. So those elusive women in our family that we just can't figure out what their maiden name was. So there you go. Perhaps their father or brother are listed in the deeds. So there you go. Partition deed, the fifth type, used when joint owners decide to divide the property ownership among themselves, and they're typically it occurs when heirs or siblings need to separate a shared family estate. So again, very important types of deeds here. Now, the process of this is number one, it would be written by a clerk or a lawyer. The second step, it would be taken and presented to the court. Why? Because it's a legal document. It must be proven. The third step, they would copy it into the deed. So your county clerk would copy it into the deed book. Remember that even clerks make errors when they're transcribing or in any sort of way. So perhaps if you are looking for your surname of Smythe and the clerk writes it down as Smith, S-M-I-T-H, just know to check for that spelling, because they made errors just as, in transcribing anything, as well as our ancestors. And again, it was just how it was perhaps heard. So if someone said, my name is this, perhaps it was in German or French or Russian, and they were just doing the best they could to spell it out from, with what they were able to hear. The fourth is, the original is returned back to the grantee. Very important. Now, what can we find in deeds? Well, let's check it out. We can find out family relationships. Perhaps we don't know who Aunt Susie is until we find her listed in this deed with her brother, who was the 3 times great-grandfather to you, or that 4th times great-grandmother. And now you might have Aunt Susie's maiden name because maybe she was a spinster, so now you know your 4 times great-grandmother's maiden name. Hint, hint. Marriage, maiden names again. I just mentioned that. It could include death dates. It will point you to other records. So be on the lookout for that. It can take you to tax records, court records, and so on, and other deeds, for sure. Even vital. Literacy, slave ownership, or the transfer of slaves. Community and social histories. It can give you migration. It can give you origin and more for your ancestors. So loads and loads of wonderful information about our family are in these records. Here is a list of some of the things that are listed in a deed. Now, you may not always find, for example, the dower release, as we'll see in my ancestors example we'll look at in a minute, and we'll talk more about what a dower release is later. But all these others you will find. Of course, you'll have your grantor and grantee, which again could be more than one of each. You'll have a filing date. You'll have a consideration for the price. You'll have a description of the land. I love the one that I'm going to show y'all soon, including some neighbors, not always. Those are important. They're part of your cluster. They're part of your fan club, friends, associates, neighbors. Remember all this, and it's good. We'll talk about a log later as well. When it was written, you'll have witnesses and signatures. Check out the signatures. Are any of those people you don't know who may or may not be related to you? And were you aware, perhaps, if your ancestor or ancestors were illiterate? They'll have a mark. And there is acknowledgement and proof. Now, here is my 3 times great-grandparents' deed. This is the deed between my 3 times great-grandfather, Tennessee Mathis Dean Grimes, and his wife, Susan Mahaley Grimes, and her first cousin, Thomas Porter Brogan, and Martha Jane Brogan. Now, at the time when I found this record, I didn't know who the Brogans were or why they were even listed with my great-great-great-grandparents. And it took me a little bit of time to sit down and do some good genealogical detective work. And I was excited to find out that his father and Susan's mother were brother and sister. So, anyway, if you see at the top, I have them listed. They're selling this to Mr. T.J. Lockridge, and it gives us the consideration for the amount of money that they're looking at wanting to sell for, $700, that consideration. And then I love this part where it says, a certain tract or parcel of land situated in Webster County in state of Kentucky on the waters of Deer Creek and bounded as follows to wit, beginning at a white oak, dogwood, and hickory, northwest corner to Thomas Trice, and in the original line, thence with the same north 65, and so on. I just think that's beautiful because that gives me an image of what the land may have looked like back in 1866. Yeah. So, obviously not there today, most likely, but it'd be really cool if it were. So here again are the grand tours and the grantee. We have the signatures, and my great-great-great-grandmother and her first cousin's wife were both not able to write, and so we have their marks. So again, that gave me a little bit more insight about her education and the cousin's wife as well. And I have the signatures notated over here. Again, we've got all four, and which I have transcribed on the right. But again, it shows all of them listed. And again, at the time, I didn't know who this Brogan family was, couple. And so that's where your detective work comes into play when you have these people listed that are either buying it together or selling this together. So always remember that. And the viz is just meaning namely or to wit. It's a Latin word. And we'll look at a list of some Latin terms later. But at the bottom of this, we have where the county clerk, it says, certifies that the foregoing deed was produced to me in my office and acknowledged by TMD Grimes and SM Grimes, his wife, to be their act and deed on the 22nd day of November 1866. And then it wasn't until the 13th of April 1867 by the Brogans. And that it was before P.D. Clayton, one of my deputies, as per endorsement. Witness my hand on this day, the 23rd day of April 1867, JF4 clerk. So again, what I would do is I would take and get my chart out and I would write down each person, so the grand tour, the grantees, and the officials, and then I would get the volume number and page number and so on. But like I said, we'll look at a chart in a minute. But this was their fantastic deed, and I'm just so excited that I was able to find that. Now, understanding what dower release means. Dower release is a formal legal document in which a spouse voluntarily gives up their dower rights, a historical legal interest in real estate owned by their partner. Widows were entitled to a third of the real property during their lifetime or widowhood, not necessarily ownership. So, an example would be like a third of what the land produced. If the husband chose to sell the land, then the wife had to sign a dower release. So you're probably asking me, okay, Robert, what is a dower release? A little bit more, or what is a dower? More in detail, excuse me. Well, that would be this. Under the doctrine of coverture, a woman's legal identity was absorbed by her husband, but she retained specific protections, such as lifetime use or life estate. The widow was entitled to a life estate and 1/3 of any real property that her husband owned during their marriage. Owned, not left. This was not just a share of the harvest. She had the rights to the land to live on it. She could rent it out and had use of the resources. So if there were a lot of good crops that year, there was timber and so on, she could use that, and that was her own support. That's how she made her living. Uh, Consent to sell. So a husband generally could not sell land that was subject to the wife's dower rights without her explicit consent. If he did sell it without her signing off, she was able to often claim that third from the new owner after the husband died. And so if your great 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 granny, like, her husband passes and the land had been sold, and then, like, let's say a gentleman, Mr. Smith, buys this, well, she can go and she has the right to claim that third. So if it was still in timber or crops or whatever, she had that right to claim that. The next thing is protection from creditors. Because the dower was intended for her survival, it was often taken off the top of the estate, so to say, meaning that her share was protected from her husband's creditors after his death. So this was a type of a guarantee type thing. Revision of the land. If the woman brought actual land as a dowry, the freehold title technically remained hers. While the husband managed it and kept the profits during the marriage, he could not sell it without her permission, and it reverted entirely to her if she outlived him. Pin money and settlements. Wealthier families often used marriage settlements, which were similar to modern prenups, to set aside this pin money. It was an allowance for the lady for her personal spending, or it was to create trusts that kept her property entirely out of her husband's legal control. So, very important to know what a dower is, and so this is what a dower was considered. And so if you have a dower release, this would be important information to be able to go back and relate on to, associate, I should say, with, to understand why this was able to do this, because this was her legal rights. So. All right, the next thing is the deed research process. We have the use of census records as pointers, access deed indexes and deed books, and analyze the deed information. All right, here is a chart for the census years from 1850 to 1940, and broken down there, minus 1880, sorry, and 1890, giving us the column number of what the value would be as far as in the property that the person owned. So check out the column numbers. This is on your handout when you're viewing your census records of your relatives, because this will tell you what the amount was, number one, and then number two, it will lead you to go and search for deed records for this ancestor. Where can we locate these? Family Search, as I said earlier, has a large collection. State archives, the National Archives, courthouses, and in abstract books as well. So check all of these out. Here is that index log I've been mentioning. Excuse me. And what I do is I normally put the family surname at the top, and then I put down who sold and who was buying. And then I look at the deed book, I record that, and the volume number listed, the page number. I put any neighbors that are listed in the deed, like Mr. Trice was in my Grimes record. And then I put the public officials, because that will give me clues as to more about who was serving in that county during that time. And perhaps if I were to look at like a local history and I had my chart handy, I might also locate some of these gentlemen or ladies who were serving in these positions. So just a very basic index log here for you. This is a book that's by Christine Rose. Very valuable to have in your library collection if you don't have it already. It gives index information for each county. it's illustrated differently. There's different types of indexing. Not all deed records are indexed the same, and she gives a very great detailed breakdown of the different types of courthouse indexes. So that would be a good book to check out sometime if you have it at a public library or you can find it online. Um, if not, it's a good book to have in your library collection. So I really enjoy it. All right, here are some Latin terms. Now, I'm not a Latin scholar, nor do I speak it, so you'll have to excuse me if I butcher these terms. So, et ach and ek ver. So, and husband and wife are pretty common. You'll see in a record. Sometimes et al. And others. Bona fide, in good faith. My great-great-great-grandmother Susan Grimes, when she applied for her widow's pension after living in Texas for, oh goodness, many years. They arrived about 1878, 1879, I believe, somewhere in that area. And it said on her application that she'd been a bona fide citizen of the state of Texas since that time. I thought that was pretty cool. So, in good faith, and so on. So, these are just some interesting Latin terms that could be found in deeds, not in every single one, and the usage in the deeds as well. Analyzing deed information. Detailed analysis. Read carefully and take structured notes. Transcription. Fully transcribe the record. Get everything down, all the A's, the these, the those, the thous, etc. And even the Latin words, wit and vix and etc. And et al. Cross-verification. Correlate with census, tax, and probate data and other records. Expand your scope. Research across multiple eras and areas. Look in the neighboring counties. Look in the neighboring states. You never know what you might find across the state line for one of your relatives. And utilize the fan club, those clusters, the community members, the people in the records, everything when you've come to a dead end and you can't find a specific record for someone. Jump in and enjoy the fan club and travel with them, friends, associates, and neighbors, and explore, explore, explore. Here is a vital record, excuse me, it's a census, agricultural census record, sorry, from 1880, Monroe County, Alabama. This is my 3 times great-grandfather, I can't speak, Joseph T. Ledkins. This is valuable to have. It gives awesome clues. It tells me how many acres of land as well as woodland was on his property. It tells me the worth of the land, livestock, and machinery. Look at that cost, and that was 1880. His animals that he had, and the items he had sold that the year before. And so this would tell me, number one, okay, go to Monroe County, Alabama, and let me search for the deeds for this ancestor because he owned land. And also, let me go check out those tax records because why? Because he was taxed for the land, he was taxed for the animals, and so on. So yeah, that's more and more records. So don't just skip through the census records. And this is an extra census that was taken in 1880. Information, I should say, about it. And I mean, these are such valuable and awesome records. So don't overlook anything. The business of farming, sharecropping system. I'm going to go ahead and put all this up here. So sharecropping, the dependency was on the landowner. They had to provide all the capital, the land, the tools, the seed, the housing, and it was under a very strict supervisor. I'm sure we've never had a strict supervisor, or if we're still working, have one today ever. We have tenant farming. That was where the farmer leased the land, and typically they own their own tools and their animals. These were systems that were across the board for not just one race, but several races of people. So look into that. If we see, for example, in the census records, they are renting, then there is possibility that they were doing tenant farming, for example. So important to know. Also, the nice thing with tenant farming was that there was minimal landlord intervention, so they didn't really have a very strict supervisor. So maybe that was the better option. I don't know. Deeds, focusing on slavery for just a few minutes. So this is a book that I own and I read. It's, excuse me, it is one to get to. I say it's a little difficult. Um, Politically correct language is not used in it as we would do today, so just be advised if you read it that you don't get upset by it. But it provides information about white women in the American South as slave owners. So, important thing to have. We mainly think, like from a lot of movies perhaps, that it was the men that owned slaves, but women did as well. So, anyway. Slavery-related deeds may include marriage contracts, mortgages, gift deeds, manumissions, and bills of sale. So these are some other types of that can go along with slave-related deeds if someone is researching African American ancestry. These would be excellent clues to provide that marriage, for example, if they cannot find a marriage record at all, well, it might list the year or possible full date or maybe even the location of where they married. So, very valuable clues for them. And this also could be for everyone across the board. It gives us mortgages on our ancestors' lands if they had to take it out. Again, gift deeds and so on. Community research. We have schoolhouses, churches, lodges, and other social groups, cemeteries, and businesses. So all of these are in deeds. This would tell us where maybe our family attended church. And if that would be the case, if the church was nearby the property or the property was next to the church property or the schoolhouse property, for example, or a cemetery, that might tell you where they worshiped. And that would lead you to church records and so on. Schoolhouses, school records, lodges like in social groups, the Masons, Eastern Stars, for example. So excellent clues there. And again, cemeteries. Perhaps the cemetery is where your ancestors buried and you have no record to provide the location. It could be in an unmarked grave, but maybe someone has written it down if they've written the history of the community or history of the cemetery. So excellent to know, as well as businesses. Where did they buy their goods from? What local stores, etc. So excellent to know. All right, on the wrap up here, we have talked about what you can find in your records. You might be able to locate siblings, long lost parents, or even learn the name of the spouse or maiden name of the ladies. Where did they migrate from before they came to Texas? Were they originally from Arkansas or Florida or Maine? We get land history and inheritance. We learn who received what land from whom and how did they get it? Did they pay for it? Was it gifted? Evidence of their literacy. Were they able to write? We learn about death sometimes. Communities and social histories. We get that cluster community names. We get the fan club. We get slave ownership. We get names of slaves sometimes. And so on. So quite a bit of information we can learn. Our tips and takeaways here are these. Make sure that you copy that entire deed, y'all. Don't leave no letter hidden at all. Put the a, thee, thou, thes, etc. Scrutinize the witnesses and neighbors. Put them on that chart. Don't leave them out. Correlate with other sources. Tax records, census records, vital records, etc. If you see undivided interest, excuse me, this often means that land was inherited. Create a deed table. Transcribe every critical detail of that deed. Used to research enslavers. So for African Americans, this is an excellent way to trace your ancestry, for example. Uncover the community and social histories. Where did they get together for their meetings? Where did they attend church? Where did they go to school, etc.? Why can't we find a deed sometimes? Just real quickly. Sometimes it's because of legal seizure, boundary shifts, unrecorded inheritance, non registration, and clerical oversight. Um, the clerks may have missed the record. Maybe they misspelled the name. The seller failed to file the paperwork. That's not a good thing. What about the sheriff's sales? They couldn't pay their taxes. The sheriff's sales are posted in newspapers. Hint, hint, another clue, another area to research. Maybe with the boundary shifts, like my ancestor, they were in Baldwin County raising their family after the Civil War. Then the state decided to create a new county. They now are in Scambia County. What happened? Well, they didn't just pack up and move to another piece of property. It's just they stayed where they were and this imaginary line was drawn. So different reasons. So look for neighboring counties, neighboring states again. Very important. Here's a list of some recommended books. This is on your handout. The book I've been talking about a little bit is by E. Wade Hon, or Hon, I may be butchering his name, I'm sorry, Land and Property Records in the United States. This has maps of the 50 states that will show you the land offices that I spoke about earlier, so very good to know. And sorry about that, it should be ancestry.com there, so a little typo for you, error. And so, anyway, just some optional books for reading. These websites are on your handout. Check them out. I utilize Family Search Full Text Search for so many of much of my research. Maps of U.S. Excellent to see the boundary changes, and I'm a map nerd, so I love that. And these others, the Bureau of Land Management's on there as well. So check those out. Again, this on your handout. I have included my contact information as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me using one of those methods. If you are watching this video, I'm going to try to put it on my YouTube channel. If you want to comment there, you may, and so on. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope everyone has a great day.